Picture the farming village of Oppuravu during a time of agricultural abundance. This is a traditional Saivite community where men walk the green fields in white vesties, their foreheads marked with the sacred ash of Thiruneru, and granaries are filled to the brim. Here we meet Aghalya. He is a master farmer with a massive surplus of grain, but he views his harvest through a specific lens. To Aghalya, his agricultural wealth is a communal tool, an asset meant to flow naturally into the wider community whenever a neighbor is in need. Then we have his neighbor, Manickam. As we see on the right, Manickam holds an entirely opposing philosophy. He treats wealth strictly as a mechanism for personal power. To him, the safest place for capital is locked inside a dark stone room, entirely isolated from the outside world. As long as the monsoon rains arrive on time and the soil yields plenty, both the communal approach and the isolationist approach can coexist.
While the sun is shining, the deep differences between these two men remain hidden. Then, the monsoon vanishes, rivers slow to a trickle, and water reserves rapidly deplete. The physical baseline of Oppuravu's economy is wiped out. The green fields collapse, and the fertile soil fractures into a dry, cracked grid. The human toll hits immediately. Panic spreads through the farming network as family reserves run dry and the reality of hunger sets in. This environmental vacuum creates a definitive stress test. The village is about to find out which philosophy of wealth management actually ensures survival when the system fails. Manickam looks at the failing crops and sees an opportunity. He locks the heavy doors of his mansion, restricting the local food supply. His plan is to wait out the panic and sell his grain at 10 times the normal price. To protect his assets, Manickam makes a deliberate choice to sever himself from the village network. He becomes a closed loop, entirely alone. Aghalya faces a different dilemma. He looks at his full granary and then at his neighbors. He questions how he can consume his surplus while the very people who helped him build that wealth are collapsing right outside his door. The drought presents an economic choice. A person with surplus capital must decide to either extract profit from the collapse or spend their capital to absorb the blow. Aghalya unlocks his granary and throws the doors wide open. He calls the village together and declares that his private reserves are now free for any family that needs to survive. This diagram shows the granary as the Oruni, the communal village pond. Aghalya converts private wealth into public infrastructure. The central node pushes resources outward, stabilizing failing nodes. Expanding into a canopy, the system becomes the Payamaram, the communal fruit tree providing shade and food. By acting as both an Oruni and a Payamaram, Aghalya catches the falling socioeconomic ecosystem. He prevents the total collapse of Oppuravu. The skies finally open up. The heavy rains return, hitting the parched earth and turning the dry dust back into rich, dark mud. When the next planting season arrives, the entire village shows up at Aghalya's property. Together, they plow his fields, sow his seeds, and work his land. No one asks for wages or coins in return. The labor is an outpouring of gratitude and communal loyalty. By absorbing the shock of the drought, Aghalya ensured his own future. He is no longer an isolated farmer. He has an entire village invested in his success. Manickam survived the drought. He still sits on mountains of grain inside his mansion, but he is entirely alone, with no one left willing to speak to him. Centuries ago, the poet Aivini distilled this dynamic in her Athichoodi teachings. Without the village, Aghalya would have fields he couldn't plow and harvests he couldn't protect. Manickam sits alone with his fading surplus, while Aghalya's wealth lives on through the people he helped. A life lived in harmony with the community is the only asset that actually grows when the world gets harder.